You're working 12-hour shifts in a massive factory, and every single day for an entire week, someone steals your lunch, 6 days straight, no food, just hunger and growing rage. So I decided to teach this lunch thief a lesson they'd never forget. I loaded my fajitas with Carolina Reaper peppers, the world's hottest chili, and left them as bait. What happened next? Let's just say the screams echoing through that factory floor will haunt me forever. If you've ever fantasized about getting perfect revenge on someone who wronged you, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit like if you're ready for a story where justice gets served with a side of pure fire. And stick around, because this tale of workplace revenge will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about getting even. Let's dive in. Let me paint you the picture of where this all went down. This wasn't your typical office environment. This was a massive industrial factory, the kind of place where the machinery never stops humming and the fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry wasps. The company hired through 5 different temp agencies, which meant the workforce was in constant flux. People appeared one day and vanished the next, like ghosts haunting the production floor. In a place like that, finding a familiar face was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The anonymity was suffocating. You'd work shoulder to shoulder with someone for weeks, learning their habits, their quirks, maybe even sharing a laugh during break time. Then one Monday morning, they'd simply be gone, replaced by another stranger with the same tired eyes and cautious demeanor that came with temp work. No goodbyes, no explanations, just empty spaces where people used to be. It was in this revolving door of humanity that my tormentor operated. The lunchbox bandit, as I came to call them in my head, was a phantom. They struck with surgical precision, always when the lunchroom was empty, always leaving no trace except for my empty stomach and growing frustration. The first time it happened, I chalked it up to a mistake. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong lunch. These things happen, right? I spent that 12-hour shift with my stomach grinding against itself, surviving on nothing but black coffee and sheer willpower. The hunger gnawed at me like a living thing, making my hands shake and my concentration scatter like leaves in the wind. The second day, doubt crept in. Lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. But lunch thieves, that's a different story. By the third day, I was certain someone was deliberately targeting my food, and they were getting bolder about it. Let me tell you about those 12-hour shifts. They weren't just long, they were brutal. The kind of work that left your muscles screaming and your mind numb. Without proper nutrition, every hour felt like an eternity. By hour 8, I'd be seeing spots. By hour 10, my hands would tremble as I operated the machinery. By hour 12, I was running on nothing but spite and stubbornness. Each morning, I'd carefully pack my lunch with the same ritual, a proper meal, none of that processed junk from the vending machines. I'm talking about real food, homemade sandwiches stacked with fresh ingredients, hearty soups in thermos containers, fruit that actually had flavour. I'd wake up early just to prepare these meals, seeing them as the one bright spot in an otherwise grueling day. And every single day, like clockwork, I'd return to the lunchroom to find my spot in the communal refrigerator empty. Not just empty, violated. Someone had reached past dozens of other lunches, deliberately chosen mine, and walked away with the fuel I needed to survive those marathon shifts. The worst part wasn't even the hunger, it was the helplessness. In a factory full of strangers, how do you catch a ghost? I started arriving at lunch earlier, hoping to catch them in the act. Nothing. I tried hiding my lunch in different spots, behind other containers, wrapped in opaque bags, even disguised in a plain brown paper sack. The bandit found it every time. I began studying my co-workers with the intensity of a detective. Was it the quiet guy from the night shift who always seemed to avoid eye contact? The woman from shipping who had those calculating eyes? The temp worker who'd been there just long enough to learn everyone's routines? In a place where faces change like the weather, Everyone was a suspect, and paranoia became my constant companion. By the fourth day, my co-workers started noticing. "You look pale," someone mentioned during break. "Everything okay?" But how do you explain that you're being systematically starved by an invisible tormentor without sounding completely unhinged? So I just smiled and nodded, while inside something dark was taking root. The fifth day broke something in me. I'd made my favourite meal, a beautiful chicken parmesan with homemade marinara sauce and fresh mozzarella. I'd spent an hour the night before preparing it, thinking about how that first bite would taste after 8 hours of hard labour. When I opened that refrigerator and found nothing but empty space where my lunch should have been, I actually saw red, not metaphorically, literally. My vision tinged crimson around the edges as rage flooded through my system like molten metal. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my empty stomach a hollow cavern of fury. My mind raced through scenario after scenario. I could set up a camera, but the factory had strict policies about recording devices. I could stake out the lunchroom, but my supervisor would notice if I kept disappearing during work hours. I could confront everyone, but what was I going to say? "Hey, did you steal my lunch?" To 200 rotating temp workers? No, this called for something more elegant, something that would catch the thief red-handed and deliver justice in the most poetic way possible. That's when I remembered the Carolina Reapers sitting in my spice cabinet at home. For those who don't know, Carolina Reaper peppers aren't just hot, they're weapons-grade capsaicin delivery systems. We're talking about peppers that clock in at over 2.2 million Scoville units. To put that in perspective, pepper spray maxes out around 5 million, and jalapenos barely register at 8,000. These aren't food. They're botanical torture devices that happen to be edible. I'd bought them months earlier during a brief phase where I thought I was tough enough to handle extreme heat. One tiny taste had sent me into a 30-minute spiral of agony, gulping milk and questioning my life choices. They'd been sitting unused ever since, waiting for the perfect opportunity. And now, that opportunity had presented itself. I spent that entire evening crafting my masterpiece. These weren't going to be just any fajitas. They were going to be the most beautiful, tempting fajitas ever created, the bait in my perfectly orchestrated trap. I started with premium steak, the kind that costs more per pound than most people make in an hour. I marinated it in a blend of lime juice, garlic, and cumin, letting those flavors penetrate every fiber. While that worked its magic, I prepared fresh bell peppers in vibrant reds and yellows, onions that would caramelize to golden perfection, and a pico de gallo that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But here's where my plan turned diabolical. Those beautiful Carolina Reapers got minced into that innocent-looking pico de gallo. I wore gloves, double gloves, actually, and worked with the precision of a chemist. Just enough to deliver a payload that would make the thief's mouth feel like the surface of the sun, but disguised so perfectly that they'd look like tiny pieces of regular tomato. The assembly was a work of art. Perfectly seasoned steak, still glistening from the grill, vegetables that popped with colour and freshness, and sitting on top like a beautiful deadly crown, that innocent-looking pico de gallo studded with microscopic fragments of pure fire. I arranged everything in a clear Tupperware container, and this detail was crucial. The transparency wasn't an accident. I wanted whoever was stealing my lunches to see exactly what they were taking. I wanted them to look at those perfect fajitas and think they'd hit the jackpot. I garnished the whole thing with fresh cilantro and lime wedges, creating a presentation so appetizing it practically glowed under the fluorescent lights. The next morning, I walked into that factory with the confidence of someone who knows they're about to witness justice in its purest form. I placed my beautiful trap in the refrigerator, right in my usual spot, and went to work with a spring in my step that I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first hour, I kept glancing toward the lunchroom, expecting to hear something, but the factory floor was just its usual symphony of machinery and industrial noise. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the bandit had moved on to easier targets. Then, around 9 a.m., it happened. The scream cut through the factory noise like a blade through silk. It wasn't just any scream. It was the sound of someone in absolute uncomprehending agony, a primal wail that spoke of pain beyond description, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze in your veins. I dropped what I was doing and ran toward the lunchroom, along with dozens of other workers. What I found there will be burned into my memory until the day I die. There, sprawled on the floor like a fallen warrior, was my lunch thief. But this wasn't the moment of triumph I'd imagined. This was something far more terrifying. He was a middle-aged man, someone I'd seen around but never really noticed. Just another face in the endless parade of temp workers. Now he was gasping like a fish out of water, his face flushed a deep, alarming red, sweat pouring down his forehead in torrents, his hands clawed at his throat, and with each desperate breath, a horrible wheezing sound escaped his lips. "Call 911!" someone shouted, but the words seemed to come from very far away. I stood frozen, watching this man fight for air, realizing with crystal clarity that my Carolina Reapers hadn't just delivered justice, they'd triggered a massive asthma attack. The paramedics arrived within minutes that felt like hours. They worked with practiced efficiency, administering oxygen and medication, while the man's breathing slowly, agonizingly, began to stabilize. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, his eyes met mine for just a moment. In that glance, I saw recognition, understanding, and something that might have been acceptance. He never said a word, not to the paramedics, not to our supervisor, not to anyone. He just let them wheel him away while the entire factory watched in stunned silence. I never saw him again after that day. Whether he recovered fully, whether he found another job, whether he learned his lesson, I'll never know. He simply vanished into the same revolving door that had brought him into my life in the first place. What started as a simple desire for justice turned into something far more complex. Sometimes when you set out to teach someone a lesson, you end up learning something about yourself instead. The line between justice and cruelty isn't always as clear as we'd like to believe. So what do you think? Was this justified revenge, or did I go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. If this story got your heart racing, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of workplace justice gone wild. And remember, sometimes the most satisfying revenge is the kind that teaches everyone involved something they'll never forget.